Have you ever shared something small, like a sandwich, and ended up changing someone's life forever? This is the story of a small-town mechanic with calloused hands and a quiet heart. One cold afternoon, he offers half his lunch to a stranger, standing in the snow. What he doesn't know is, she's a billionaire, and what she doesn't know is, he might be the only person in the world who can help her feel human again. It's a story about kindness, redemption, and the kind of love that sneaks up on you when you least expect it. So grab a warm drink, settle in, and if you enjoy heartfelt healing stories like this, consider subscribing to the channel. We share tales that touch the heart and remind us that even the smallest acts of goodness can lead to something extraordinary. Now, let's begin. Poor mechanic shares his lunch. Stranger turns out to be a secret billionaire who buys his garage. The wind rolled in off the mountains like a freight train, sharp with snow and silence. In the tiny Colorado town of Bear Hollow, the streets had emptied by noon, and the only sound outside Tom Bennett's auto garage was the crunch of snow beneath his boots as he locked the front bay door. The garage wasn't much, just a slanted roof, rusted signage, and a heater that wheezed more than it worked. But it was Tom's. Well, mostly. A third of it belonged to the bank, and another third belonged to late nights and sore shoulders. The rest? That belonged to the people in town who trusted him to keep their old trucks running through the mountain winters. Tom glanced at his watch. 12:37 p.m., right on schedule. He shuffled into the back office, where a space heater glowed weakly near a fold-out table. There, wrapped in a brown paper bag and packed with more care than contents, was his lunch: a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, a hard-boiled egg, and a thermos of lukewarm coffee. Just as he was about to sit down, something flickered past the frost-laced window, a figure, small, slight, moving slowly along the sidewalk. He squinted. A woman in a long, oversized coat, hugging herself tightly against the wind. No hat, no gloves. Tom watched her pause near the garage, glancing around, like she wasn't sure if she should knock or keep walking. Her boots looked thin, so did her face. He stood, hesitated for only a breath, then opened the door. "You all right, miss?" he called, his voice roughened by years of exhaust and early mornings. The woman looked up, startled. Her eyes were a grey, wide and searching. She hesitated, then stepped toward the entrance, snow crunching underfoot. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bother you," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the wind. "I'm just trying to get somewhere warm." Tom nodded toward the garage behind him. "Well, I've got heat, kind of, and coffee that's only slightly terrible. You're welcome to both." She looked at him, unsure. He gave a small smile, trying to put her at ease. "It ain't the Ritz, but it beats freezing out here." After a moment, she nodded and followed him inside. The blast of stale warmth hit them both, and the woman visibly relaxed, rubbing her hands together. As she stepped in, "I'm Tom," he said, setting his thermos on the table. "Tom Bennett." She hesitated, then replied, "Eva." He noticed the pause before she said it, like she had to search for the name. "You got somewhere you're headed, Eva?" he asked, as he poured 2 cups of coffee from his battered thermos. "Not really," she said, cupping her hands around the paper cup he handed her. "I was just walking." Tom didn't push. He'd seen that look before, too proud to ask, too tired to explain. "Here," he said, reaching into the paper bag and splitting the sandwich in half. "It's not much, but it's better than wind chill and empty hands." She blinked as if surprised. "You're giving me your lunch?" Tom shrugged. "Well, I didn't make it for the Queen of England or anything. Half's more than enough." Eva accepted the sandwich with both hands, like it was something sacred. For a moment, they sat in silence. 2 strangers in a cluttered garage, sharing warmth and something like grace. "You run this place by yourself?" she asked after a few bites. "Mostly. Got a kid who helps part-time, but it's just me these days. Been that way a while." "And you live around here?" Just up the road. With my daughter and my mom. Eva looked at him curiously. Your mom lives with you? Tom gave a short laugh. Yeah, she's got early-stage Alzheimer's. Some days she's with us. Some days she thinks I'm my dad. And some days she thinks she's 20 and dating a rodeo clown named Skip. Eva smiled faintly. That's a lot. Tom nodded, sipping his coffee. It is, but you carry what you're given, right? There was a pause. Something passed over her face. Regret. Sadness. It vanished quickly. Thank you, she said softly. For the sandwich, and the coffee, and the heat. He shrugged again, uncomfortable with praise. No one should be out in this weather. And you looked like you'd gone a few miles too many on an empty tank. She studied him for a moment. People usually don't offer kindness without a catch. Tom leaned back in his chair, arms crossed loosely. I guess I'm old-fashioned that way. The wind howled outside, but inside the garage it felt strangely warm, like the kind of warmth that comes from a fire built not with wood, but with goodwill. As the afternoon wore on, Eva helped him clean the tool rack without being asked. She didn't talk much, but she listened. And when she smiled, there was a gentleness behind it that Tom hadn't seen in a long while. He didn't know where she came from, or why she looked like she was running from something. But he knew the look in her eyes when she held that half sandwich. It was the same look Lily had the first time he gave her a bike he rebuilt from scraps, a look that said, someone thought of me. And sometimes that was enough to start something new, something that mattered. The next morning dawned grey and bitter, with frost painting delicate feathers across the garage windows. Tom unlocked the bay door just after 7, his breath fogging in the cold air as he flipped the lights on one by one. The buzz of the fluorescents overhead filled the silence. It was just another winter day in Bear Hollow, quiet, still, and far too cold for anyone without good reason to be outdoors. Except she was there again. Eva, sitting on the old bench by the shop's back wall, wrapped in the same threadbare coat, her hands tucked under her arms for warmth. She looked up when he walked in, a little startled, like she wasn't sure whether she'd overstayed her welcome. Morning, Tom said simply, setting his thermos on the counter. Morning, she echoed. Her voice was raspy, like she hadn't slept much. Or maybe like she hadn't used it in a while. Tom didn't ask why she was still there. Part of him had expected it. He poured 2 cups of coffee and handed her one. I figured you might come back, he said. There's heat, sort of, and coffee. Definitely bad. She gave a weak smile. It's better than nothing. Tom nodded toward the space heater. I can get you a better coat, if you want. Something from the back. Belonged to an old mechanic who retired 2 years ago. Probably still smells like motor oil and regret, but it's warm. Thanks, she said, but didn't move to take it. She held the coffee like it was the only thing anchoring her to this world. Tom leaned against the workbench. Where you from, Eva? She didn't answer at first, just stared down into the cup. East, she finally said. Big cities, airports, meetings. That's a lot of ground to cover, he said, watching her carefully. She glanced up, her expression unreadable. I've covered a lot of ground. He nodded, reading the spaces between her words. You got family out here? A pause, then a shake of her head. Not anymore. It wasn't much of an answer, but Tom knew better than to push. Sometimes silence said more than a story ever could. Eva looked around the garage as if taking it in for the first time. The rusted tool cabinets, the mismatched tires, the faded Bennett Auto Repair sign hanging crooked above the front counter. You fix everything yourself? She asked. Everything but the vending machine. That thing's been stealing quarters since '98. She smiled again, small, tired, but real. Tom gestured to the stack of work orders on the counter. You can hang out if you want. I've got an oil change and a busted timing belt to deal with. Not glamorous, but there's worse ways to spend a morning. To his surprise, Eva stood and rolled up the sleeves of her coat. "I can help," she said. Tom raised an eyebrow. "You ever change oil?" "No, but I'm a quick learner." He handed her a pair of gloves and pointed toward a beat-up Subaru. "Let's see what you got." For the next 2 hours, she worked beside him, not talking much, but focused. She watched his hands, mirrored his movements. She wasn't afraid to get dirty, and she didn't flinch when oil stained her gloves or when the wrench slipped and scraped her knuckles. There was something about the way she moved, precise, careful, almost too careful, like someone who'd spent a long time trying not to break anything or anyone. Around 10, the bell above the door jingled, and Tom's daughter Lily burst in, her backpack bouncing and cheeks flushed from the cold. "Daddy," Tom grinned. "Hey, Bug, Grandma okay?" "Still thinks I'm a tiny horse," Lily said cheerfully, pulling off her hat. "She tried to brush my hair with a shoehorn this morning." Tom laughed and ruffled her hair. "She's having a cowboy. A phase again." Then he turned to Eva. "This is Lily, my kiddo. Lily, this is Miss Eva." Lily looked at Eva with open curiosity. "Are you the lady Daddy gave his sandwich to?" Eva blinked, then nodded slowly. "I guess I am." "You must be special," Lily said matter-of-factly. "Daddy doesn't share food, not even fries." Tom cleared his throat, slightly embarrassed. Okay, that's enough honesty for one day." But Eva looked like she might cry. She knelt so she was eye level with Lily. "Well, your daddy's a very kind man." "He is," Lily said proudly. "He even helps Mr. Wiggins fix his snowblower and never charges him. And he shovels Miss Claire's walkway, even though she says she doesn't need help, but she really does." Eva looked up at Tom, eyes soft. "You're raising her right," she said. Tom shrugged, uncomfortable. "Trying my best." Later, after Lily curled up on the couch in the corner with a comic book, Tom and Eva sat on overturned crates by the heater. He handed her a peanut butter granola bar, his idea of lunch when he didn't have time to make a sandwich. "You said you used to be in meetings and airports?" he said casually. "Used to," she replied. "Not anymore." He waited, but she didn't elaborate. "Ever think about going back?" She looked at the flickering heater. "No. Some places, some versions of life, they just stop fitting." Tom nodded slowly. "Yeah, I get that." And he did. For a long moment they sat in quiet, not awkward silence, but the kind that settles between people when they understand something unspoken. Tom looked over and caught her watching him. "What?" he asked. Eva shook her head. "Nothing. It's just been a while since someone didn't ask me to explain myself." "Well," he said with a half-smile, "I figure when you're ready, you will. And if not, that's okay too." Her lips parted, then closed again. She looked away, blinking faster than she wanted. For the first time in a long while, Eva Morgan felt seen, not for her last name, not for her bank account, just for being a woman in a too-thin coat, holding a warm cup of bad coffee in a garage that smelled like engine oil and second chances. The winter sun, weak and reluctant, filtered through the smudged garage windows as Tom adjusted the carburetor on an old Chevy truck. Outside, the cold hung heavy in the air, but inside, the garage buzzed with a quiet rhythm. The soft clang of tools, the whir of a power drill, and the occasional hum of conversation. Eva sat cross-legged near the front bay, sorting a box of miscellaneous bolts and screws like it was a puzzle to be solved. She worked methodically, fingers smudged with grease, a small furrow between her brows. She wasn't a mechanic, not yet, but Tom had to admit she picked things up fast. And more than that, she seemed to care. Not just about the work, but about being useful. It was something he understood more than he liked to admit. Around noon, the shop phone rang, an old rotary model mounted on the wall, its bell loud and sudden. Tom wiped his hands and picked it up. He listened for a moment, then his face changed. Concern settled across his features. "Yeah, okay, I'll be right." "There." He hung up and turned to Ava. "That was the senior center." Mum wandered off again. Eva stood immediately. "Do you want me to come with you?" Tom hesitated, but something in her tone, calm, steady, made him nod. "Yeah. Thanks." They drove in silence through town, past shuttered stores and quiet porches. Bear Hollow wasn't big, just a few winding streets surrounded by snow-draped hills, but for someone with fading memory, it could be a labyrinth. Tom gripped the steering wheel tightly. "She's been getting worse," he said quietly. "Some days she's sharp as a tack. Other days—" He shook his head. "She forgets I'm her son. Calls me George, my dad's name. Sometimes she thinks she's still 20 and on a date. Once she tried to flirt with the mailman." Eva gave a soft chuckle, but her eyes were kind. "That must be hard." Tom nodded. "It is. But you don't walk away from the people who raised you. You stay. You carry what they can't." They found her at the corner of Main and Elm, sitting on a bench outside the library, humming to herself and petting a stray cat that clearly didn't belong to anyone. She looked up as they approached. "Oh, George," she said brightly, her smile wide. "There you are. I told the nice librarian you'd come." Tom knelt in front of her. "Hey, Mom, it's Tom, remember?" She tilted her head. "Tom? My Tommy?" "That's right," he said, taking her gloved hands gently in his. "Let's get you home." Eva offered a quiet greeting, but Tom's mother only glanced at her briefly before turning her attention back to the cat. "This one's got eyes like your father's," she murmured. On the way back, Eva sat in the back seat beside her, speaking in a soft, steady voice that somehow calmed the older woman's scattered thoughts. Tom glanced at them through the rearview mirror, two women from entirely different worlds, sharing a space that neither of them had expected to find comfort in. At the house, Lily ran out to meet them, her pigtails bouncing. "Grandma, you scared me." "I went for a walk, dear." "It was lovely," Tom's mother replied, blissfully unaware of the worry she'd caused, while Lily helped her grandmother. Inside, Eva lingered with Tom on the porch. "She's sweet," Eva said softly. "You can see the pieces of who she was still shining through." "Some days more than others," Tom said. He leaned on the porch rail, watching his daughter help his mother with her boots. "I promised my dad I'd take care of her. He passed. 5 years ago? Heart attack, quick." Eva folded her arms against the cold. "You've had a lot on your shoulders." Tom exhaled. "Yeah, well, life doesn't hand out breaks based on fairness. You just keep moving. One oil change, one winter, one day at a time." They stood there a moment, the hush between them filled with the distant sound of laughter from inside. Tom glanced over at Eva. "You ever take care of anyone?" Her eyes darkened for a moment. "Not in the way you do. I had people who depended on me, employees, partners, but it's not the same as wiping tears or helping someone remember who they are." Tom didn't press, but something in her voice told him there was more to the story, something raw. He respected the distance, but part of him hoped that one day she'd let him past it. Inside, Eva helped prepare lunch while Tom tended to his mother, who insisted on setting the table, but forgot where the plates were stored. Over grilled cheese and tomato soup. The four of them sat around the kitchen table, an odd little patchwork family for the afternoon. Tom watched Eva quietly offer Lily half her sandwich and laugh at one of his mother's wildly inaccurate stories about a rodeo in 1972. For a moment, he allowed himself to pretend this was normal, that this was something that could last. After lunch, he walked Eva to the door. "You didn't have to come with me," he said. "I wanted to," she replied. "Sometimes it helps to feel needed," Tom nodded. "Well, you were." She hesitated on the porch. "You don't talk much about yourself." He gave her a small, sheepish grin. "I've found it's easier to listen, I think," she said slowly. that listening is the most generous form of kindness. He met her eyes, and something passed between them. Not romance, not yet. But a recognition, a flicker of two lives, frayed and mended in different places, brushing gently against each other. Eva turned and walked down the steps, her breath a cloud in the winter air. Tom watched her go, the quiet settling around him. Again, but this time it didn't feel quite as heavy. Not all burdens are meant to be carried alone. Some are lighter when shared. The old guitar sat forgotten in the corner of the garage, propped against a stack of bald tires and half covered by an oil-stained tarp. Tom hadn't touched it in years. It had belonged to his father, back when the nights were quieter, and life felt simpler. These days, there wasn't much room for music between deadlines, repairs, and managing the slow unraveling of his mother's memory. But that morning, as Tom opened up the garage and flicked on the lights, he found Eva kneeling beside it. She was brushing dust off the worn wood, her fingers gentle, almost reverent. The sunlight filtered through the cracked window and caught the strands of her hair, making her look almost ethereal in the cold glow. "You play?" he asked from the doorway, voice still rough from sleep. Eva looked up, startled. "A little. I used to anyway." Tom stepped inside, brushing snow off his jacket. "Be careful. That thing's older than I am and about as moody." She grinned, a rare flash of something light. "I'll be gentle." He watched as she strummed once. The guitar groaned at first, then settled into tune. Her fingers moved slowly, hesitantly, like someone reacquainting themselves with a part of their past they'd buried for too long. After a few moments, a melody began to emerge, soft, haunting, familiar but impossible to name. Tom froze. It wasn't just the song. It was the sound of something he didn't realize he missed. Music had always belonged to another time in his life. A time when his father would sit on the porch after dinner and pluck out old folk songs, while his mother hummed in the kitchen and little Tom pretended not to listen while sketching car engines in a notebook. Now, in this cold garage filled with grease and silence, the music felt like memory made real. "Where'd you learn?" he asked quietly. Eva didn't look up. "My mother played. I taught myself by watching her. We weren't close, but music was how we spoke when words didn't work." Tom nodded. "I get that." She glanced up. "Do you play?" "Used to. Before life got loud." Eva offered the guitar to him. "Your turn." He hesitated. "I'm not exactly Carnegie Hall material." She smirked. "Neither am I." Tom took the guitar and strummed a few rusty chords. His fingers remembered more than he expected. He fell into a simple melody, an old Johnny Cash tune his dad used to sing. Eva started humming along, then softly sang the chorus, her voice low and dusky, like smoke curling in a winter sky. They shared the song like a secret. When it ended, there was a long silence. "That was—" Tom started, then stopped. "Yeah," Eva said, smiling. They worked in companionable quiet the rest of the morning, tuning up an old pickup truck, replacing worn brake pads. Every so often, Eva would hum under her breath, and Tom found himself listening not just with his ears, but with something deeper. At lunchtime, Lily burst in as usual, red-cheeked and full of energy. She paused when she saw Eva with the guitar. "You can play?" she asked, eyes wide. "A little," Eva replied modestly. "Can you teach me?" Eva looked to Tom for approval. He shrugged, grinning. "Why not? Beats learning from YouTube." Lily plopped down eagerly beside her, and soon the two were plucking at strings, laughing at sour notes, and cheering the few clean ones. Tom watched them from across the room, wiping his hands on a rag. Something tightened in his chest, not sadness, but the ache of possibility, the ache of what if. Later that afternoon, as Lily helped her grandmother with puzzles in the corner office, Eva lingered by the workbench. She held a small wrench in one hand, turning it over thoughtfully. You ever think music and machines aren't that different? She asked. Tom glanced at her. How do you figure? Well, she said, setting the wrench down, both require rhythm, balance, the right pressure at the right time. One wrong note, one wrong turn, and the whole thing falls apart. Tom considered that. Maybe, but at least with machines you can usually fix the broken parts. She looked at him. And with people. He hesitated. Sometimes you just have to find a way to play around the damage. Eva nodded, the corner of her mouth twitching in a half smile. That sounds like someone who's done a lot of both. Tom shrugged. Maybe. There was a pause. Then she asked more, carefully, do you ever miss who you used to be? He looked at her, surprised by the question. I miss parts, he admitted. But I've learned not to dwell too long on the guy I was before. He didn't have Lily. He didn't understand what real responsibility felt like, or grief, or love that hurts and heals at the same time. Eva nodded slowly. Grief is funny like that. It leaves holes, but sometimes if you're lucky, new things grow in the spaces. They stood quietly for a moment, listening to the faint sound of Lily's laughter from the office, the creak of the old heater, the whisper of snow outside. Tom spoke softly. You know, you don't have to keep running. Eva looked at him, startled. I'm not. You don't have to explain. I can see it. Whatever it is you're carrying, it's heavy. But you don't have to carry it alone. She looked down at the wrench again, her voice a whisper. I don't know if I remember how to let someone else help. Tom didn't push. He simply said, well, the offer stands. Whether it's music, engines, or just bad coffee, I'm here. For a woman who had learned to survive by never leaning on anyone, that meant more than she could say. The storm rolled in just after midnight. Tom had been up late, finishing a carburetor rebuild for a snowplow that couldn't afford to break down again this week. Outside, the wind howled and slapped at the siding, rattling the old windows. He glanced toward the corner room where his mother slept, then toward Lily's door. Both were quiet, still. He turned off the garage lights and moved through the kitchen, setting the coffee pot for the morning and checking the lock on the back door like he always did. Routine helped him keep things straight. When your life was filled with unpredictable days and fading minds, routines became your anchor. He was halfway to bed when he noticed it, the light in the garage office. He frowned. Slipping on his coat and boots, Tom stepped outside, crunching through the freshly fallen snow. The garage door had been left ajar, just a crack, but enough to let in the cold. He pushed it open, expecting to find maybe a light he'd forgotten to switch off, or a radio left humming. Instead, he found Eva, curled up on the small, worn couch. In the office, her coat draped around her shoulders like a blanket, the guitar cradled in her arms. She looked like she hadn't slept, or maybe like she'd tried to and failed. Eva? He asked gently. She startled, sitting up too fast. Her eyes were red, and her hair fell in loose waves around her face, as though she'd spent the night tossing and turning. I'm sorry, she said quickly, her voice raw. I couldn't sleep. The room was too quiet. Tom stepped inside, closing the door behind him. Something wrong? Eva hesitated, her gaze falling to the guitar. Her fingers gripped the neck tightly, like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. I had a dream, she said at last. Or maybe a memory. They feel the same sometimes. She paused. I was in a boardroom. Glass walls, 12 men around a long table. I remember the cold of the marble floor through my heels. They were voting to remove me from my own company. One of them handed me a pen I was supposed to sign. Tom said nothing. He let her speak. I remember the sound of the pen scratching paper. I remember one of them, the one I thought I loved, not looking at me, just staring out the window like I was already gone. Her voice cracked. And I remember thinking, I gave everything to this. I gave all of me and no one even blinked. The heater clicked once in the silence. Tom sat down on the floor across from her, resting his back against the wall. "That's a hell of a memory to carry." Ava nodded, eyes glassy. "It plays in my head like a broken film reel, and I keep wondering, was I foolish to believe in people? Or did I just trust the wrong ones?" Tom leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Maybe it's both. But that doesn't mean you stop believing. It just means you get wiser about where you plant your trust." She looked at him. "You say that like it's easy. It's not. But, look, I've had people let me down too. When my wife died, half the folks I thought were friends disappeared, couldn't handle the grief or the responsibility, or maybe just didn't care as much as I thought. I stopped expecting much from anyone after that, except Lily, and Mom, in her way. Eva watched him carefully. "But," he continued, "then you showed up, looking like you'd been through hell, and you didn't ask for anything. You just showed up, and you stayed." He paused. "That matters." She set the guitar aside and drew her knees up to her chest. "I don't know how to be anything but what I was. And I'm not even sure who that was anymore." Tom gave a small smile. "Well, around here, we don't care much for resumes. We care more about who shows up when the snow starts falling." A faint laugh escaped her. "Is that the Bear Hollow motto?" "Should be," he replied. "We'd get it carved on a wooden sign and hang it crooked above the general store." Ava shook her head, but the tightness in her shoulders had eased. She leaned back into the couch and looked up at the ceiling. "Sometimes I wonder what it would be like," she said, "to just start over, drop the names, the money, the weight, just be someone else, someone simpler." Tom's voice was quiet. "You don't need to be someone else. You just need to be someone honest." That made her go still. She turned her head toward him. "I'm trying." "I know," he said. "And for what it's worth, I think you're doing a damn good job." She smiled again, faint, tired, but genuine. A clock somewhere ticked off the silence. Finally, Eva asked, "Mind if I stay here tonight? I promise not to play sad guitar songs." Tom stood and stretched. "Stay as long as you need. Just make sure you don't fall asleep with that heater too close. I've seen what a melted extension cord looks like. It's not pretty." As he reached for the door, she called softly, "Tom?" He turned. "Thank you for not asking me to explain everything, for letting me be." He nodded. "Everyone deserves a space where they don't have to be fixed. Just understood." Outside, the snow fell in soft, steady waves, blanketing the quiet town in white, and inside the garage, amidst the scent of oil and the hum of old machinery, two broken people sat a little closer to being whole. By mid-January, the snow no longer felt magical. It felt endless, like time itself had frozen over Bear Hollow, trapping everyone in a loop of white mornings and grey afternoons. Tom knew the pattern by heart now. Wake before dawn, make breakfast. For Lily and his mother, get to the garage before the engine block got too cold to touch, and pray that one more car came in needing just enough work to keep the lights on. But that morning, no cars came. No calls, no walk-ins, just silence. And an envelope. It was waiting on the front counter when Tom walked into the garage. A crisp, official white envelope with the bank's logo stamped in the corner and his name typed clean across the front. No return address, no preamble. He didn't open it right away. He just stood there, staring at it, the way you stare at a letter from the draft board or a test result you're not ready to read. Eventually, he tore it open with grease-stained fingers. Final notice, payment delinquency. Notice of repossession, February 2nd. His stomach dropped. They were taking the garage. Not tomorrow. Not next month. In 2 weeks. He sat heavily on the stool behind the counter, the letter trembling in his hand. This wasn't unexpected. He'd been behind on payments for over a year. But he'd always found a way to shuffle things around, to Stay one step ahead. Now there were no more steps, no more tricks. He wasn't just losing a business, he was losing his anchor. The place where he felt most useful, most competent. The one thing he had left that wasn't falling apart. Tom. Eva's voice cut gently through the air. He looked up to see her standing near the back of the shop, wiping her hands on a rag. Her face was calm, but her eyes caught the tension. In his posture immediately, he quickly folded the letter and slipped it into the drawer. "Hey," she tilted her head, "everything all right?" Tom forced a smile. "Yeah, just paperwork. The fun kind." Eva didn't push, but she didn't walk away either. Instead, she set the rag down and crossed the shop to where he sat quiet as a snowfall. "Tom," she said gently, "you don't have to pretend." He sighed and looked away. "It's fine." "Is it?" There was no judgment in her tone, just care. That made it worse somehow. Tom rubbed his temples. "I'm not good at asking for help, Eva." She sat beside him. "That makes two of us." He let out a dry laugh. "They're taking the garage. 2 weeks from now it's theirs. And I don't have a backup plan. I've got a daughter to raise, a mother who needs constant care, and this place is all I've got. I can't afford to fall apart." Eva looked down, her hands folded. "What if you didn't have to do it alone?" Tom shook his head. "I can't ask you for anything. You've done enough already." "You haven't asked me for anything." There was a long pause. Tom leaned back, exhaling slowly. "I've spent most of my life being the one people depend on. I know how to fix broken engines, bad wiring, even busted snowmobiles held together with duct tape and prayer. But I don't know how to fix this, and I sure as hell don't know how to ask someone like you, someone who's been burned, for trust." Eva turned her face toward him, her expression unreadable. "Maybe trust starts in moments like this. Quiet ones, honest ones." Tom met her eyes. "You have every reason to run from other people's messes." She gave a soft smile. "But maybe I don't want to run anymore." The moment hovered between them, fragile and flickering. Tom wanted to say something more, but the bell above. The door jingled, and Lily burst in, breathless and dusted with snow. "Daddy, Grandma says the toaster's possessed." Tom stood quickly, forcing his voice to steady. "All right, Bug, let's go exercise some appliances." As he followed her out, he glanced back. Eva was still there, seated at the counter, staring at the drawer where he'd hidden the letter. That night, after the house was quiet and the storm had passed, Tom found himself in the garage again. He couldn't sleep. The letter felt like a weight in his chest. He ran his hand along the old workbench, fingers tracing the etched initials, TB plus EM from years ago. Not Ava. Emily, his late wife. That bench had seen every chapter of his life. Now it would be someone else's property. He didn't hear the door open behind him, but he felt the warmth. Eva stood in the doorway, wearing a flannel shirt and Tom's old work jacket, far too big for her. In her hand was a mug of coffee. "Peace. Offering," she said. Tom accepted it with a nod. "I'm not much for peace tonight," she didn't argue. Just sat beside him on the bench, sipping quietly. "You ever wonder," she said softly, "why things fall apart all at once? All the time." They sat in silence, the hum of the space heater the only sound between them. Then Eva said, "When my father died, I buried myself in work. I made the company my identity, my fortress, and when they voted me out, it felt like losing him all over again, because I didn't know who I was without the title." Tom glanced at her. "I think," she continued, "that sometimes we hold onto things not just because we need them, but because we're afraid of who we'll be without them." Tom looked down at the mug in his hands. "This garage is the last piece of my life that still feels like it's mine. If I lose it—" Eva turned toward him, her voice gentle but firm. "You don't lose yourself when you lose a place, Tom. You're still the man who shows up every day, who shares his lunch with strangers, who fixes snowblowers for old men who can't pay. He didn't answer right away, but when he finally spoke, it was barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to let go." Eva reached for his hand, her touch light but steady. "Maybe," she said, "you don't have to let go. Maybe you just need to open your hand and see what's willing to stay." And in that quiet, snow-wrapped garage, something unspoken shifted between them, soft as breath, real as warmth. Not a rescue, not a romance, not yet, but maybe the beginning of both. The moon hung low over Bear Hollow, casting long silver shadows across the snowbanks and rooftops. It was one of those winter nights where everything felt still, frozen in time, suspended in breath. Tom stood alone on the porch, arms crossed, watching his breath rise in white clouds. Inside the house, the lights had gone out one by one. Lily was asleep. His mother, too. Even the town itself felt like it had finally surrendered to the silence. Eva hadn't come inside. She'd gone for a walk after dinner, saying she needed air. That had been over an hour ago. Tom glanced down the snow-dusted road, anxiety gnawing at the edge of his calm. He'd learned not to ask too many questions, not with someone like Eva, who wore her walls like armor. But the longer she was gone, the heavier the air around him felt. Just as he was about to grab his coat, he saw her. She was walking slowly, her boots crunching softly on the ice-crusted path. Her face was tilted toward the sky, the moonlight painting her skin in pale gold. She wasn't crying, but there was something fragile in her posture, like a glass just barely holding together. Tom waited at the top step. When she reached him, she offered a small, tired smile. "I got lost in thought," she said. "Did you find anything worth keeping?" he asked gently. She looked up at him, her eyes clearer than he'd seen in days. "Yeah, I think I did." He stepped aside and opened the door, but she shook her head. "Not yet," she said. "Can we sit a minute?" He nodded, and they sat side by side on the porch steps, the wood cold even through their jeans. A soft breeze stirred the bare trees, whispering secrets only winter could hear. "I've been carrying something," she said after a long silence, "and I need to tell someone before it eats me alive." Tom turned toward her but said nothing, just listened. She took a deep breath, her voice steady but quiet. "The company, Morgan Motors, it wasn't just a job. I built it from the ground up with my father. We worked side by side for 15 years. I was his only child, and after my mother passed, we poured everything into that place. It wasn't just about cars. It was about legacy, about doing something meaningful." Tom listened without blinking. "After he died, I became CEO. Youngest in the industry at the time. I made waves. We went electric early. We changed how small towns accessed service. But with growth came pressure, investors, board members, and one of them, he was someone I trusted, more than trusted." Her voice faltered. "We were together, quietly. It wasn't public, but it was real, or I thought it was. Turns out it was a strategy. He gained leverage, made alliances behind my back. He used my grief and love like a bargaining chip, and the night they voted me out, he sat there and didn't say a word." She looked down at her hands, clasped tightly in her lap. They framed it as a leadership transition, said I needed time to mourn, to refocus. What they meant was, "You're in the way now." Tom's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "I didn't fight it," Eva continued. "I could have gone public, sued, but I was exhausted. I didn't want to spend another year in courtrooms and news headlines. So I signed the papers, and I walked away." She looked up at him, the moonlight, catching the shimmer in her eyes. "I disappeared, Tom. Sold my apartment, closed my accounts, cut ties. I've been living under a different name ever since, just moving, not toward anything, just away from everything." Tom's voice was low, steady. "You didn't disappear. You protected yourself." I felt like a coward. "You're not." They sat quietly again, the night settling around them like a woolen blanket. "I didn't come to Bear Hollow for a fresh start," she said. "I didn't even know where I was going. I just ran until I couldn't anymore, and then you gave me a sandwich." Tom chuckled softly, the sound low and warm. "I keep thinking about that moment," Eva said. "How it was so simple, so ordinary, but something shifted that day, like maybe kindness still exists in the world." He turned to her, his voice quiet but clear. "It does." She studied his face. "You didn't treat me like a project or a puzzle. You didn't ask for explanations or backstories. You just made room for me." "That's what people do when they care," he said. "Why?" she asked. "You barely knew me." Tom hesitated, then looked at her full on. "Because I've been alone. Because I've stood in kitchens at 2 a.m. wondering how I'd pay bills. Because I've watched someone I love forget my name. And because when I saw you out there in the cold, I recognized something." "What? Someone worth saving?" Her eyes shone now, not with sadness, but with something softer, warmer. "I'm still me, Tom," she said, "even without the job, the name, the power. But I'm scared that if I stay here, if I let myself feel this, I'll start to want things again, and I'm not sure I can survive losing anything else." He reached for her hand, slowly, gently, and wrapped his fingers around hers. "Then don't think of it as wanting. Think of it as remembering, and let yourself remember what it feels like to belong." They sat there until the moon dipped low behind the trees and the sky turned a soft, bruised blue. Neither of them moved, not even when the cold seeped in through the seams of their coats, because for the first time in a long time, silence didn't feel like emptiness. It felt like possibility. The snow was fresh again that morning, untouched and glistening like powdered glass across the hills of Bear Hollow. Tom was bent under the hood of a '96 Ford Ranger, humming along to the radio, some old Springsteen tune that crackled faintly through the dusty speaker. Eva sat at the workbench, scribbling something into her notebook. Sketches, numbers, maybe just thoughts. Tom had learned not to ask too many questions about that notebook. She always shut it the moment he got too close. It had been a quiet morning, the kind that felt almost too peaceful. Eva had been smiling more lately, laughing with Lily, even helping Tom's mom in the afternoons, reading aloud from worn mystery paperbacks and listening patiently to her fragmented memories. Something had begun to settle in the air. Comfort, familiarity, the soft tension of something unspoken building between two people who both thought their hearts were too damaged to try again. Then the black SUV rolled up. It was the kind of vehicle that didn't belong in Bear Hollow. Polished, spotless despite the snow, with tinted windows and tires that looked too new for mountain roads. Tom looked up from the truck engine, wiping his hands on a rag. The SUV idled for a long moment before the driver's door opened. A man stepped out, tall. Expensive wool coat, dark scarf, polished shoes that had never met gravel before today. He scanned the garage slowly, like he already knew what he was looking for. Eva stood frozen behind the workbench, her hand still resting on the edge of her notebook. The man's eyes landed on her. "Miss Morgan," he said. The air in the garage shifted. Tom straightened, eyes darting from the man to Eva. Her face had gone pale, but her jaw was tight, her spine straight. "Michael," she said at last, her voice cool, controlled, but Tom could hear the tremor beneath it. "I've been looking for you," the man said, stepping forward. "For weeks." "I didn't want to be found." Michael looked around, his gaze briefly pausing on Tom before returning to Eva. "You disappeared in the middle of a fiscal quarter. Your lawyers stopped responding. You're still on certain legal documents, Eva. People are asking questions." "I signed the papers," she said. "You made sure of that." Michael's face didn't change, but his tone sharpened. "There are processes, Eva. Transitions. You can't just walk away from your name." "I didn't walk away from my name," she replied, eyes narrowing. I walked away from the version of me you created. Tom stepped forward now, slow and steady. Is there a reason you're here? Michael looked him up and down, barely concealing the disdain behind his professional smile. And you are Tom Bennett, he said, owner of this garage. Ah, Michael said. I see. Tom didn't like the way he said it, as if he'd just confirmed something insignificant. Eva stepped between them slightly. Michael, what do you want? I came to talk, he said. Some things have changed. We need to revisit certain decisions. The board has concerns. Eva shook her head. No, you don't get to show up here, throw around legal jargon, and expect me to follow you back into that world. You belong in that world, Michael said, his voice rising. This is a detour, a phase. You've made your point. Now come home. That word, home. Tom watched as Eva flinched, barely noticeable, but enough for him to feel it in his own chest. I am home, she said, her voice firm now, and I'm not going back. Michael stared at her, clearly thrown off. You can't possibly mean that. What is this place? A shack in the mountains? A mechanic's garage? Eva glanced at Tom, then back at Michael. It's more than anything I had with you. The silence was immediate, heavy. Michael opened his mouth to argue, but Eva stepped forward. You taught me how to lead, Michael. You taught me how to fight for a seat at the table. But you also taught me how it feels to be used, to be betrayed. I've had time to think about that here, where no one knows my net worth or reads me like a press release. Her voice softened, but her gaze stayed sharp. I don't need power to feel valuable. I just needed to remember I was already enough. Michael looked like he wanted to say something, maybe even apologize, but it died on his tongue. He glanced again at Tom, then slowly turned back toward the SUV. If you change your mind, he said, you know where to find us. She didn't answer. The SUV pulled away a minute later, tires crunching through the snow, disappearing down the road without a goodbye. Tom stood quietly for a while, waiting. Eva let out a shaky breath, closing her eyes. You all right? He asked. She nodded, then shook her head. I didn't think it would hit me like that, seeing him again, hearing that voice. Tom stepped closer. You held your ground. She opened her eyes and looked at him. Because of you. He blinked. Me? You gave me space to be small, to be angry, to be unsure. You let me rebuild without asking when I'd be finished. Her eyes glistened. You don't know what that means to someone who's only ever been valuable for what she can produce. Tom was quiet for a moment. I know what it's like to be needed for your usefulness, and I know what it feels like to wonder if anyone would stay if the tools were taken away. She smiled, bittersweet. But you stayed, he nodded. So, did you? There wasn't a kiss, no sweeping gesture, just the two of them standing in the quiet aftermath of a past finally confronted, heart still bruised but beating clearer than before. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't walking away. It's choosing to stay. The following morning, Tom found the note tucked under the thermos on the garage counter. His name was written in neat, deliberate handwriting. Tom, followed by nothing else. No return address, no signature, just a folded sheet of paper that already felt too heavy in his hands. He didn't open it at first. He stared at it for a full minute, as if the ink might evaporate, or the moment might somehow reverse itself. But it didn't. When he finally unfolded it, the first sentence told him everything. Tom, I'm sorry I didn't say goodbye in person. I don't think I could have held it together. His eyes moved slowly down the page. Please don't think this is because of you. You've shown me a kind of kindness I forgot existed in this world. You reminded me that it's okay to breathe again, to trust, to laugh. But I'm not ready to be stayed for. There are pieces of me I still need to recover, and I can't ask you to wait while I figure out how to be whole. You have Lily. your mother, your life, and you deserve someone who knows where she stands. Please don't come after me. I just needed you to know that you made a difference. You made me feel human again, and I'll never forget that." Eva. Tom read it twice, then a third time, each word etched deeper than the last. It wasn't anger that came. It wasn't even sadness, not exactly. It was more like a quiet cracking in the chest, the kind that only comes when something real has been lost. He sat on the stool behind the counter for a long time, the shop still dark, his hands still dirty from the night before. The scent of motor oil hung thick in the air, and in the silence, the walls of the garage seemed to close in. Eva was gone. No word to Lily, no gentle goodbye to his mother. Just gone. He didn't blame her, but God, it hurt. 3 days passed. Then 4. Lily asked where Eva had gone, and Tom told her the truth in pieces small enough for a child to carry. That Eva had somewhere she needed to be, that she didn't say goodbye, because goodbyes are sometimes the hardest things to say. That maybe, just maybe, she'd be back someday. Lily didn't cry. She just nodded and went quiet. The next morning, Tom found her staring at the notebook Eva had left behind by mistake. It sat on the shelf above the workbench, dusty and forgotten. He didn't open it. It felt too sacred, like a wound not ready to scab over. The garage was quieter now. Even the tools seemed to echo differently. His mother asked about the nice woman with the soft voice more than once, and each time Tom would offer a smile he didn't quite feel and say, "She's visiting family." It was easier than the truth, that someone had stepped into their lives and left a mark deep enough to bruise. The letter from the bank came on a Thursday. Tom didn't open it right away. After all, what was the point? But when he finally did, something strange happened. There was no demand, no warning, just one sentence: loan balance paid in full. Ownership transferred to T. Bennett. He blinked, read it again, then again. He called the bank, waited through 5 layers of transfers. When he finally reached someone who knew what they were talking about, the answer was simple: anonymous buyer. Paid in full, the garage is yours. He hung up slowly. There was no need to guess. He knew who had done it. She hadn't just left. She'd left something behind. Not just memories, not just warmth, but a future. That night, the snow returned. Light. At first, then heavier, blanketing the town in another coat of white silence. Tom walked to the edge of the driveway, his boots crunching softly beneath him, and looked up at the sky. For the first time in days, he let the tears fall. Not in anguish, but in gratitude, because even when people leave, not all of them truly go. Some remain in the echo of a laugh, in the hollow of a cup set down on a counter, in the hum of a guitar string that still vibrates even after the last note fades. He went inside and pulled Ava's notebook from the shelf. For a moment he hesitated. Then he opened it. Inside were sketches of the garage layout, notes about small business grants, a rough plan to create a non-profit mechanic school for underserved youth in small towns. Below that, in the margin, in her tight handwriting, "He doesn't know how good he is." "But I do." Tom closed the notebook, his throat thick. She hadn't run away. She had prepared the soil, and now it was his turn to grow something. Later that night, as Lily slept curled beneath her quilt, and his mother snored softly in the next room, Tom returned to the porch. The moon was out again, the same soft white disk that had hung above them the night Eva told him her truth. He stood there, wrapped in silence, in memory, and then he whispered to no one, and maybe to her, "Thank you." It wasn't enough, but it was everything. The days that followed moved with a strange kind of rhythm, slow, quiet, filled with the soft ache of something unfinished. Tom returned to the garage each morning, coffee in hand, tools arranged just the way he liked them, and still felt the absence echoing in the corners, but life didn't pause. Engines still sputtered, Snow still fell. His mother still asked about the woman with the warm voice, and Lily still told stories about fixing carburetors, just like Miss Eva taught me. And so Tom kept moving. He didn't tell anyone about the bank letter, about the garage now being his, about the debt that had vanished like a ghost in the night. It felt like a secret too sacred to say aloud. Like if he named it, it might disappear again, but he carried it with him like a second heartbeat. Then, one morning, it arrived. He was walking Lily to the mailbox at the end of the driveway. She liked to kick at the icy piles along the way, talking about her science project and asking if they could get a puppy again. Tom listened, half distracted, his breath turning to fog in the frigid air. When he opened the mailbox, there was a single envelope inside, no return address. But the handwriting was unmistakable. He turned it over in his hands as Lily skipped ahead, toward the porch. It was heavier than usual, thicker. Something was inside. He waited until she was inside before sitting on the steps, peeling it open carefully like it might break. Inside was a letter and a key. Dear Tom, I didn't think I'd write again so soon, but some things are too important to leave unsaid. The garage belongs to you now. You probably guessed that. I never wanted it to be a gift. I wanted it to be a reflection, a mirror of what you already gave me. Space, safety, dignity. The key you're holding unlocks a small property just outside town. It's nothing fancy. Used to be an old ranger station, long abandoned. I had it cleaned up and deeded over in your name. But here's the catch. I want you to do something with it. Remember the sketches in my notebook, the youth apprenticeship idea? It doesn't have to be big. Just begin. Teach someone what you know. Give someone the same chance you gave me to be seen as more than what they've lost. This isn't repayment, Tom. This is partnership. Even if I'm not standing next to you, I want to believe we're still building something together. Maybe one day I'll be ready to come back, to stay. But until then, please don't stop moving forward. You fixed more than just cars, Tom. You fixed something in me I thought was beyond repair. With all my hope, Tom read the letter twice. Then he just sat there, key in hand, letter trembling. In his fingers, heart full in a way that felt almost unbearable. He didn't cry, not in the way he had when she left, but something in him cracked open again, in a different way. Because she hadn't just disappeared. She had laid down roots, quietly, intentionally, and asked him to help them grow. That afternoon, he drove out to the property just past the ridge. The ranger station was small, no more than a rectangular log cabin with a sagging roof and boarded-up windows. But as Tom stepped onto the porch and turned the key in the door, something clicked, not just the lock, but something deeper. Inside, the place was dusty but solid. A wide main room, a narrow hallway, a back office that could be a classroom, a workbench already half cleared as if someone had swept it clean just before locking up for the last time. He walked the floorboards slowly, imagining what it could be: a workshop, a place where broken kids could learn to fix broken things, a place where hands could get dirty and hearts could grow clean. He stood in the center of the room and let the silence settle around him. Not the kind of silence that comes from absence, but the kind that waits for something to begin. He smiled, small and to himself. Then he got to work. The first kid came 2 weeks later. Tyler, 17, angry at the world, all elbows and sharp. Words and baggy clothes, sent by a teacher who believed he was smarter than he let on. Tom handed him a wrench and pointed to the hood of a rusted-out Ford and said, "Let's see what you can do." Tyler said nothing, but he came back the next day and the day after that. By spring there were 5 kids and a name carved above the front porch: Eva House. Lily helped paint the sign. His mother still asked if Eva was coming back, and Tom always smiled and said, not yet, but he believed. And every time he stood in that workshop, surrounded by laughter and questions and the clang of growing confidence, he felt her there, In the wood, in the tools, in the light, she had given him more than just a garage. She had given him a mission, and through that she had never really left. The garage smelled like motor oil and warm bread. Tom stood at the old wooden table in the center of the shop, the same table where months ago he had first offered a stranger half of his sandwich and a steaming cup of bad coffee. It looked different now, sanded smooth and stained a rich chestnut brown, but the dents and scratches remained like scars on a healed wound. Honest, earned, the table had become a symbol, a place where kids spread out their greasy notebooks, where Lily did homework after school, where Tom had sat with bankers, donors, school counselors, people who wanted to help, to believe. And now, once again, he was waiting at that table with a sandwich in his hand and something big on his mind. The scent of fresh snow hung in the air outside. It was late March, but Bear Hollow refused to give up winter without a fight. The wind tapped gently at the windows. The world was still, expectant. Then he heard the sound of footsteps on gravel. He didn't move, just held his breath, heart kicking. Against his ribs, the door opened slowly, and there she was, Eva. She stood in the doorway, coat dusted with snow, hair swept back in a loose braid, eyes unsure but shining. A gust of cold air followed her in, but it wasn't the kind that chilled. It felt like relief, like breath held too long, finally being released. Tom said nothing at first. Neither did she. Then Eva looked around the shop and let out a soft, breathless laugh. "You repainted," she said. Tom chuckled. "Thought I'd try something new." Her eyes landed on the table. "You kept it." "I thought about replacing it, but it's kind of sacred now." She stepped closer, her hands still buried in the pockets of her coat. "I got your note," he said. "The one with the key, the deed, the instructions." Eva nodded. "I wasn't sure you'd want them." "I didn't want them," he said gently. "I needed them." She tilted her head. "How's it going?" He smiled. "Slow, messy, better than I expected." Eva looked toward the back office window, where sunlight streamed through onto the wall that now bore a hand-painted sign. Eva. House, learn, repair, belong. She swallowed hard. "You didn't have to name it after me." Tom leaned against the table. "I didn't name it after who you were. I named it after what you gave me, what you gave this town, what you left behind." Eva turned to face him fully, her voice soft. "I wasn't sure if I'd come back, but every time I thought about staying away, I'd think about that sandwich, about how you offered it like it was nothing, and how it changed everything." Tom smiled. "I've upgraded since then. Real turkey now, even mayonnaise." She laughed, and the sound wrapped around him like music. Familiar. Missed. Tom reached behind the counter and pulled out 2 paper-wrapped sandwiches, placing one in front of her. Then slowly he sat down across from her. "Do you remember what you said to me the night you told me your story?" he asked. Eva shook her head. "You said you didn't know how to let someone help you, that you weren't sure how to stay." She looked down, fingers resting on the wax paper in front of her. "I think," Tom continued, "that staying doesn't mean being perfect. It means choosing every day, even when it's hard." Eva's voice was barely above a whisper. "I've always been afraid that if I let people get too close, I'd disappoint them, that they'd see the cracks." Tom leaned forward slightly. "The cracks are where the light gets in, Eva." She looked up at him then, and in her eyes he saw every mile she had walked alone, every word she had swallowed, every dream she had buried, and he saw hope, quiet, tremulous, but real. Tom reached into the pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small box, not velvet, not dramatic, just simple wood, hand-carved, the kind of thing made with care. He slid it across the table. Eva stared at it. "You already gave me a home," Tom said. "Now I'm asking you to build one with me." She didn't open it right away. She just looked at him, searching. "Are you sure?" she asked. Tom nodded. I'm not offering a fairy tale. I'm offering a garage that smells like oil, a daughter who eats all the cereal, a mother who forgets half of everything but never forgets kindness. I'm offering mess, but I'm also offering love. Real, steady, the kind that doesn't disappear. When things get hard, Eva's fingers trembled as she opened the box. Inside was a silver ring, simple, elegant, but it wasn't the ring that made her cry. It was the inscription inside. You made me feel human again. She looked up, tears in her eyes, and for a moment couldn't speak. Then she nodded. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Tom, 1,000 times yes. They sat in the garage a while longer, eating sandwiches, laughing softly, hands brushing, hearts full. Outside, the snow began to melt beneath the shy promise of spring. Inside, something stronger bloomed, rooted not in perfection, but in resilience, in grace, in the beauty of second chances. The table that once held a humble lunch now held the start of forever. We'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop us a comment and say hello. It's always heartwarming to see this little storytelling community growing all over the world. If this story touched your heart, consider subscribing to the channel for more inspiring tales just like this. Stories about love, healing, and the quiet power of kindness. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today. Until next time, take care of yourself and never underestimate how much good a small act of kindness can do.